Hi, welcome back to Android and iOS apps for your WordPress blog. So now that we know the basic structure of our application, it's time to modify that structure according to our needs. You can see that we have an app.js file, and this app.js file contains the Angular module that we'll use in our application. Angular module is all the JavaScript code in context of Angular, and it is initialized as soon as our application is loaded. So you can see that in index.html we have a reference to app.js file. So this means that whenever our index.html file will be loaded, a request to app.js will also be made, and this code will be executed. Well, this code pretty much does nothing except for initializing our Angular module called starter, and the dependency Ionic, which is a library that we can see right here, is injected in our starter module so we can use it. So that's it. That's what our app.js file does so far. But what we'll do, we'll use our app.js to configure our application, and we'll implement the actual logic of our application in a separate file. We create controllers in AngularJS to implement logic of each screen. Okay, so for example, we have a home screen and we have another screen that shows posts from a particular category, say fashion. So both the screens will have different logic, so we'll have to implement two different controllers for both the screens. Now we have the option of implementing that code as controllers in our app.js file itself, but it is a good practice that we create our controllers in separate file. So we'll create another file inside our JS folder, and we'll call this as controllers.js. Okay, and we'll save the file. So we are done with saving the file. The next thing we need to do is add a reference to our controllers file right here. So we have added a reference right here as well. Okay, now if we try and run our application, you can see the application just works as it was working before. So let's try and implement some basic logic so that we get to know how controllers work in Angular. You can see that on the body tag we have an attribute ng-app, and this is set equal to starter. This means that whole of the body tag is in context of our starter module, which is an Angular module. Okay, so ng-app actually defines the name of the module that we'll use in our app.js file. So this name right here should be equal to this name right here. Next, we need to define a controller that will control the logic for this particular tag. So I'll specify the name of the controller as temp controller, because this is a temporary controller, we'll be deleting it. So we have defined a controller, and we use the ng controller attribute to define the name of the controller. So I have created a controller, I have named it temp controller, and the whole of the ion pane is in context of this controller. Whatever the logic we want to implement within this ion pane will be implemented in temp controller. Obviously we can use nested controllers, but to keep our application simple and easy to understand, we are just gonna use this one controller for now. So let's save it. Let's go back to our controller.js file and implement this controller to show a simple alert dialog so that we know that our controllers are working. So we'll just go to our controllers.js file and write in some code here so that we know that our controllers are working. So in order to create a new controller, we type in angular.module, then we type in the name of our module, which is starter. Okay, this will remain throughout our application the same. So we'll use angular.module starter everywhere we want to create a controller, and then we can use the .controller method to create a new controller. It will take two parameters. The first parameter is the name of our controller, which is menu.ctrl, and the second parameter is actually the function. Okay, and right here I'm just gonna type in an alert, and it will say hello. Okay, so this way we'll just get to know that our controllers are working. We'll just make sure that we have added a reference to our controllers.js file right here, and also that we have added a reference to our controller right here. Okay, now if we go back to our application, if you check the browser's console, you can see all the errors right here. Okay, so it tells me that temp controller is not a function got undefined. So which means that temp controller is not a function. Okay, so we have named our controller as temp controller, while we have named our controller in our controller.js file as menu controller. So we'll just change it, save it as temp controller, and now if we refresh our application, we can see the alert. Okay, so this means that the controllers are working fine. We have successfully created a controller.js file and included that in our project. We get to see two alerts because both these clients are treated as individual clients. Okay, so whatever code we'll type will be executed twice within this browser window. That is why we saw two alerts. So this is it. This is how we create controllers. We'll use controllers heavily throughout the application. In the next video, we'll create some template files and we'll also create states and implement routing.